Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a seriously fascinating story about an intern at a startup clinic who managed to single-handedly build a secure, fully automated tech system. We're talking no massive budget, no senior engineering team, and absolutely no traditional coding background. And honestly, the best part? They pulled the whole thing off entirely by talking to an AI. It's just a remarkable look at how everyday problem solvers are totally bypassing traditional barriers to create incredibly sophisticated software. We're going to map out exactly how this was done, step by step, because the methodology here is something you can absolutely adapt for your own complex workflows. So let's jump right in.
So, here's a wild question for you. Can a non-developer actually build secure, HIPAA-compliant healthcare software? It sounds like a total paradox, right? When we think about healthcare data, our minds immediately jump to strict federal regulations, heavy encryption, and, entire teams of senior software engineers grinding for months to ensure absolute security. You definitely don't picture an intern whose main tech experience relies on drag-and-drop tools. But the landscape of software development is radically changing right before our eyes. The barrier to entry has completely shifted. Those traditional gatekeepers of software architecture, well, they aren't the only ones who can build highly secure, compliant systems anymore.
And that shift brings us to a really important concept, vibe coding. You might have heard the term floating around the internet, but in practice, it basically means using AI to generate code through plain language instructions instead of manual programming. Think of it like a secret superpower. It bridges this massive gap between someone who has a highly process-oriented mind and the actual functional syntax needed to build a software solution. Instead of spending years learning how to write thousands of lines of perfectly formatted code, you just provide the logic, the workflow, and the general vibe of what you want to achieve, and the AI handles all the heavy lifting of the syntax.
Now, every great tech solution starts with a massive headache, and here is ours. Our protagonist is an intern at a startup clinic tasked with setting up standard platforms and workflows. The monster they were facing? Strict HIPAA compliance. When you work with US and Canadian healthcare organizations, you absolutely have to ensure that any platform handling sensitive patient data is fully HIPAA compliant. And that means going through the grueling process of signing a business associate agreement, or BAA, with every single tech provider. Getting those signed takes an incredible amount of time and legal oversight. On top of that bureaucratic nightmare, the clinic was severely bogged down by messy, manual workflows just for approving routine files. Administration was literally grinding to a halt.
Okay, so what did this intern actually have in their toolkit? They certainly didn't have a massive budget to go out and buy off-the-shelf enterprise software. What they did have was their everyday arsenal, a business standard Google Workspace account, and crucially, an existing BAA that was already signed with Google. This was a huge win. It meant the compliance hurdle for using standard Google tools was already cleared. 0 weeks of legal back and forth required. Combine that with some fresh inspiration from a 3-day Gen AI bootcamp by Outskill, where they saw some cutting-edge use cases for tools like Claude, Notebook LM, and prompt generators, and our intern decided to challenge themselves. Could they build a fully compliant, automated system using nothing but what they already had? At first, it looked like a total slam dunk, what we'll call the false victory. Eager to solve the problem, they built an initial file approval system. They used Workspace Studio to automate capturing basic file metadata, things like the file name, the document link, a for approval status. They even built an approver interface using AppSheet, which is pretty impressive considering it was their very first time ever touching the platform. To top the whole thing off, they created a sleek dashboard using Looker Studio to track progress. On the surface, it functioned perfectly. It really looked like they had conquered the mountain. But as you probably guessed, real-world practice is messy, and it quickly revealed some major flaws. The system just couldn't handle the unpredictability of human behavior. The absolute biggest headache was this phenomenon we'll call ghost files. Imagine this scenario. A staff member uploads a file for approval. The system instantly captures its metadata, logs it in the database. Awesome. But then, the file owner realizes they made a typo and suddenly pulls the file out of the folder to make a quick revision. Well, the database has absolutely no idea the file was removed. So approvers were logging in, seeing a pending file, clicking the link, and wasting valuable time trying to review a document that literally didn't exist anymore. Our intern was left stuck manually cleaning the database every single day, hunting down missing files, and painstakingly sorting everything by hand. The automation had basically created way more manual work. Which brings us to the core architectural problem they had to solve. Initially, they thought about building a user-facing HTML web app portal to manage everything, but that introduced a fatal security flaw. To run the necessary scripts in that kind of setup, everyday users would need edit access to the underlying master database sheet. In a healthcare setting, giving everyone access to a master database is an absolute compliance nightmare. It's a massive security risk. So they realized they had to pivot entirely to an autonomous back-end ecosystem. The new goal was simple but daunting: zero user intervention and absolutely no master sheet access for anyone except the system itself. But how do you get from a messy first attempt to a completely secure, autonomous backend without actually knowing how to code? Remember, our intern is not a software engineer. They knew how to organize and query data using languages like SQL, Docs, and mQuery, but those are primarily for data manipulation. They had absolutely zero idea how to write the Google Apps script needed to glue all these separate applications together into one cohesive ecosystem. Enter trusty Gemini, stepping up to act as an AI mentor. Because Gemini was included under the clinic's compliant Google Workspace umbrella, it was the perfect, secure tool to help bridge that technical gap. This is where the actual vibe coding kicked into high gear, and the sheer volume of work the AI completed is just incredible. Using just plain English, the intern described their logic and process-oriented goals to Gemini, and in return, Gemini generated the exact app script code needed. They vibe-coded complex scripts to capture the file owner's email addresses automatically. They generated a script that actively scanned for and auto-removed those annoying ghost files, completely wiping out the need for manual database cleanup. They wrote sophisticated, automated file routing scripts to move documents between folders based on their status. And they tightly configured the AppSheet view so the approvers only ever saw files that were genuinely sitting there pending approval. They systematically knocked out every single pain point, and they didn't manually type the backend code for any of it. What they ended up with is nothing short of beautiful in its simplicity for the end user. It's a fully secure, autonomous file approval ecosystem. After all that complex scripting and database configuring, the actual human experience is completely frictionless. People simply drop their documents into a shared Google Drive folder labeled for approval. That's literally the whole shebang. They don't touch a master database, they don't log into a clunky web portal. The system automatically ingests the file, enriches the data, filters the lists, and purges errors completely behind the scenes. It really is the holy grail of workflow automation. Let's break down how this beast actually works across 4 parallel layers, just to truly appreciate the design. Step 1 is submission and metadata capture, where the system quietly logs the dropped file right into Google Sheets. Step 2 is the review and automated routing phase. Here, approvers use that streamlined AppSheet interface on their phones or desktops, and once they hit approve, the files are instantly and automatically moved to secure approved or revision folders. Step 3 is live analytics reporting, happening constantly in real time so management always knows exactly where the bottlenecks are. And finally, step 4 is the integrated tech stack infrastructure, which is that invisible glue of AppScript and Gemini running continuously in the background to power the whole thing. And the coolest part? Look at how standard, everyday workspace tools map directly to these complex workflow actions. This is such a crucial lesson. You don't always need a million-dollar enterprise software suite to solve a major problem. File storage and submission is handled entirely by normal Google Drive. The secure metadata database is simply Google Sheets acting as a highly capable backend. And the approval interface, that mobile-ready, polished application the approvers actually interact with every day, is powered entirely by AppSheet. It is an absolute masterclass in maximizing the standard tools you already have access to. Reflecting on this whole journey, the creator noted something really interesting. They said, "Through this experience, I realized I had inadvertently jumped right into it." They'd been hearing the term vibe coding online, seeing it pop up in tech blogs and on social media, but they didn't really grasp what it meant until they were knee-deep and using an AI to translate their process-oriented logic into functional code. They didn't set out with this grand, ambitious goal to vibe code. They just set out to solve a very real, very frustrating administrative problem at their clinic. Vibe coding just happened to be the most natural, efficient pathway to get there.
So what is the big takeaway for us here? We've just seen a strict, highly regulated healthcare environment totally transformed from a mess of frustrating manual workflows into a flawless, zero-intervention ecosystem. And it was built entirely by a non-developer who leveraged AI to write the code. Honestly, this completely rewrites the rules of what everyday problem solvers can do. The barriers to building incredible software are literally lower than they have ever been in history. So ask yourself, if an intern can vibe code a secure, HIPAA-compliant ecosystem with nothing but a standard workspace account, what are you going to build next? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I hope it sparked some exciting ideas for your own workflows.